Our last speaker today will be Helen DeMarsh, 19-ton Lake Superior copper nugget.
So we've had some big specimens being spotlit, but this is certainly the largest by terms of weight. So last and certainly not least, here we go. This is a tale involving a very big chunk of metal, the Industrial Revolution, shipwrecks, and museum partnerships. This natural boulder of elemental copper is about this tall on me. It's quite large. That is the only good picture I could get of it because it gets covered up by a tarp in the winter for its own protection. And the railing got damaged by the snowplow, so I didn't have time to get a good picture before this conference. This is the picture on the website. It's about 9 feet long, or rather 9 feet tall and about 15 feet long, weighing in at about 19 tons. It happens to be a Guinness World Record. It is covered in a verdigris of secondary minerals like malachite, cuprite, azurite, and maybe a little hematite as well. It was discovered in Great Sand Bay in Lake Superior, which, if you'll excuse me, being from Michigan, if this is Michigan, Great Sand Bay is like here. It's in Lake Superior. By local hobby scuba divers Bob Barron and Dave Calpe in 1991. They had been out there looking for copper before because the Keweenaw Peninsula is the only place in the world where elemental copper is found in a large quantity. The Lake Superior Basin has many veins of copper, permineralized from filling faults in from the sort of smushing of the billion-plus-year-old mid-continental rift, basalts and conglomerates between the Canadian Shield and the Grenville province to the east. This was exposed, and the lake basin was dug out by glaciation during the last ice age, and meltwater filled in, creating Lake Superior. The syncline's ends are the Keweenaw Peninsula and Isle Royal. Copper could be found on the surface in these locations, and Anishinaabe Ojibwe native people traded it, and it reached all across North America. By 1830, there was a mining boom, bringing in miners from across the United States and immigrants from far-flung places like Northern Europe, and significantly from Cornwall, England, where they mined tin, bringing the Upper Peninsula treat of the pasty. Meanwhile, on the western shores of Lake Erie in 1835, inaccurate surveying led to a boundary dispute between the state of Ohio and the territory of Michigan over the Toledo Strip, which controls the Maumee River's entrance into Lake Erie. Congress had to intervene and ruled that Ohio would keep the Toledo Strip, but Michigan would be granted statehood and be given the Upper Peninsula, taken away from Wisconsin, thanks guys, if everyone would just take their muskets and go home before somebody got hurt. Michigan appointed Douglas Houghton as their first state geologist in 1837 and commissioned him to make a survey of their new state's natural resources, especially this big chunk they didn't even know they would have before. He was a good field researcher and took lots of samples and good notes and rightly assessed the richness of the Great Lakes state's woods, waters, iron ore, and copper. He also, significantly, called for the management and conservation of these resources. This was just in time in the 1830s for the Keweenaw to provide a lot of ready-to-use copper as opposed to ore, which takes a lot of processing, for the Industrial Revolution. The Upper Peninsula lit up America and the world. Copper was such a symbol of the state that Michigan's commemorative block in the Washington Monument is several cubic feet of solid copper. Most of the easy-to-access copper was mined out by underground mining with percussive drills, hand tools, and steam drilling, but it became less and less economically feasible, ceasing on an industrial scale by 1970. Copper veins just offshore, however, which would be inaccessible in the 19th century, were just within reach for 1990s scuba enthusiasts in the clear, cold waters of Gitchigumi. Table specimens can fetch, $100, which is worth your time. That'll fill up your oxygen tank. Now, Great Sand Bay, where this was found, I can vouch that it is perfectly beautiful above the water. It faces west. It does indeed have a nice sand beach. There's some reeds. It's just the road. There's even parking and a little pull-out, so you don't need to worry about diving off the shoulder. But on October 13th, 1845, just on the western shore of this bay, where the Eagle River enters Lake Superior, the copper boulder, which was knocked over by the lake, witnessed Douglas Houghton. He was surveying the Eagle River, and as anyone who has lived near a Great Lake knows, especially folks from the field here, the weather can turn all of a sudden. His boat capsized, and he and his two guides were drowned. Interestingly, the lake that is said not to give up its dead, like Gordon Lightfoot said, it is a cold, deep, anoxic environment. Douglas Houghton's body washed up on shore in the spring. Over a century and a half later, the cautions about natural resource conservation that Houghton had advocated led to the need to foster some relationships before this enormous copper boulder could be collected. The DNR needed to get on board to allow such a physically large and also monetarily valuable salvage to occur on state lakeshore bottomlands. To sort of facilitate this, Bob Barron became a volunteer at the A.E. Seaman Mineral Museum on Michigan Tech's campus. The museum would display the specimen on permanent loan from the state. In July 2001, it was pulled off by a crane barge, spent a few years on display at the Quincy Mine Hoist, and then in 2014 was moved to its own special pavilion just outside the Mineral Museum for all to wonder at. So thank you very much.
Well, that's the end of the Specimen Spotlight Talks. Thank you all for attending.